Hey everybody, welcome to the Backpacking Light podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking to friend of the podcast, Jeff Garmire, also known as Legend, also known as the fastest known tiger, about his recent FKT of the Colorado Trail. Stick around, you aren't going to want to miss this.
Look for me in the mountains where walking has a way of pulling you to your peace of mind.
Hey y'all, my name is Andrew Marshall, and today we're chatting with elite endurance athlete Jeff Garmire. Longtime listeners will recognize Jeff's name. We've had him on the show twice. The first was to discuss his FKT of the Long Trail, and the second time was to talk about safe backpacking in the era of COVID-19. We're also talking to filmmakers Nik Tizekker and Dylan Harris, who, along with a crew of committed individuals, are in the process of making a film about Jeff's attempt. Finally, we'll chat with Backpacking Light columnist Maggie Slepian. Maggie is Jeff's partner as well as being an accomplished hiker in her own right, and she has some interesting insights on what it's like to watch a loved one go through something so crazy. Okay, here's Ryan Jordan's interview with Jeff. Enjoy.
So Jeff, you obviously did what you set out to do, which was to finish the Colorado Trail and complete an unsupported FKT. But how are you feeling right now? Are you experiencing any emotions or feelings that you didn't expect to feel?
Yeah, it's kind of unique where, especially towards the end, I was sort of repressing all the emotions of whether it's dread or pain or like anxiety about finishing. And then they all kind of hit at the same time at the end where it's this mix of elation and like everything's suppressed. So this overwhelming feeling of, wow, I actually did it. So I guess it's this wave of like, oh my gosh, this is real, where that whole feeling was pushed out of my head for a couple days there at the end where it was just a battle.
Yeah, I can imagine the intensity of the emotions. It's got to be complicated.
Yeah, complicated is the best way to describe it. And yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a very emotional person, but multiple times just last night in a bed, it's like, wow, I am in a bed right now. I actually did that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I've been totally glued to your spot tracker the whole time. And I would get up in the middle of the night just to see where you're at. And most of the time you'd be moving,
Yeah.
I'd see you sleeping here and there, but for the most part, you'd be moving. And that was really, really kind of riveting. But the thing that like really struck me is that once you left Durango, you were on a tear. Like you left hot and
went out probably too fast.
Yeah. Tell me what went into that and what motivated you to like, just go for it.
Well, I knew that the climb from Durango up to the real altitude of the San Juans was going to be pretty big. And I also know starting an FKT or a record attempt, you have adrenaline. So I thought day one, I can use this adrenaline and just like shoot out of a cannon and get up high. And then once you get to, 11,000 feet, pretty much every time you go up or down, it kind of evens out. So I thought if I can just get as much adrenaline into that first day as possible with the heavy pack, then maybe from then on, it's like the ups and the downs will kind of even out. But just going out that hard, I always expected as my pack weight got lighter that my body would feel stronger because it's carrying less, but it actually was a lot different where my body degraded kind of at the same level my pack weight went down. So
I can
my
imagine,
mileage,
I can imagine it's like a ticking time bomb from the moment you leave.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly how it went. And just with day one going so well and getting to, especially I remember mile 43, I was feeling still really good. It was like, okay, if I can get to 51 or 52 miles on day one, I can get like 5 hours of sleep. And then I don't even have to dip into the sleep deprivation for like one more day. So I almost treated it like a bonus day with adrenaline. But yeah, it was this ticking time bomb of, yeah, this, even though my pack got a lot lighter, my body it just kept losing more and more each day. So it was a battle for especially the last 10 miles of each day.
Yeah. How do you feel about tackling the San Juans at the front end of your trip versus the back end?
That's a hard one. I don't know. I don't know what the better strategy is. I'm glad I got through it because it would have been really hard to finish with them. But at the same time, once I was above 12,000 feet on some of those climbs, like when you're on some of those mesas and up and down there, I couldn't eat or stomach anything. So I feel like my body got in the hole a little bit on nutrition just at those altitudes. But then the back half, I ate a ton and caught up and ate all my extra food then.
Right.
So there's definitely pluses and minuses. I don't know. I could not tell you which way is better to go on this trail.
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like either way is going to be really hard.
So the altitude really hammered you in the beginning and you had some GI issues and things like that. So tell us about that and how you got through them.
Yeah, it was a lot of, especially exposure, some heat, and then just the altitude. It seemed like 12,000 feet was the number, and I'd try to eat a Cliff Bar and I'd dry heave a little and then just open mouth breathing when you're working so hard. My mouth would dry out so quick just because the Colorado air is so dry, especially up high, that kind of those two things combined with the altitude and the dryness. And I did a lot of training like between 9 and 10,000 feet, but I think just getting 3,000 feet higher, it was just enough where if I'm pushing really hard, my body didn't love trying to do more than just walk. So I really, by day 3, I was really focusing on, once I dipped down at the bottom of some of those climbs, to eat as many calories as I could, because up high I was struggling a lot more.
So you definitely felt the difference between having a craving to eat at 12,000 versus 9,000?
Yeah, I could. I don't know, craving to eat, like either way, some of the stuff I was eating, it was more like I just need calories, but
Yeah.
up at 12,000, it would take me 2 hours to eat one Cliff Bar.
Oh, wow.
And then down at 9,000, I could eat, I don't know, like a bag of peanut butter pretty easily. It was just the ability for my body to want to multitask of working hard versus eating as well.
When you didn't eat, did you feel energy lows?
Yeah, it would hit late in the day. Like I was aiming for like 52 or 53 miles each day, and around mile 44 or 45 those days, it was just like I had nothing, and it was such a huge fight for those last 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you had a cold front come in at the beginning of the trip. And I imagine, I was watching the weather, and I imagine the conditions up there were pretty chilly, and I imagine you got some precipitation. So how did that affect your pacing and your head? What was going through your mind at that time?
So I just kept thinking that I lived in Colorado for 4 years. So I just kept thinking, I hope this is a Colorado storm where it's like 2 hours long and then even 20 minutes of sunshine and I'll feel better. But the morning of day 2, I got hit by so much rain. I couldn't even see that it was just absolutely miserable. And I think early on, I'm in a good headspace of like each day is like, well, this is day 2. I'll give day 2 my best. And then day 3, it's like each day is its own silo. So it was like, well, it's just raining. I'll deal with it. And then a couple days later, it snowed on me in the morning. Yeah. And it was just kind of put your head down and keep going. But if it had hit day 7, 8, or 9, I think it would have been a huge mental blow. Just like, oh, I have to deal with this now.
We'll circle around back to this because there's a big storm coming right now that I want to talk about a little bit.
I saw that, yeah.
I'm watching you go up Elk Creek and you ground to a halt, so to speak, you know. Tell me what was going through. I mean, I've been on that section of trail. It's a rough section of trail. It's actually deceptively tough. So what were you going through as you were heading up there?
So it's pretty gradual, and then you hit these 2 or 3 or 4 areas where it's avalanche debris everywhere. Mm-hmm. So you're crawling through these like mud caked, well, it had rained a little bit, so slick logs and stuff. And I usually have my heart rate on my watch and then the time just so then I'm seeing like my heart rate go to like 140 while trying to climb over things. And then you start the big ascent. It's like 3,600 feet or something up
Right.
to the Continental Divide. And like so this is day 3, I guess. So my pack's pretty heavy, or maybe day 2. Yeah. And it's just my body go like a mile and I feel like I'm just going to die and just
Right.
have to sit down and let everything calm down a little bit. And I think what was going through my mind is, wow, I hope these climbs aren't a common thing out here, because I don't know how many of these I can do.
Yeah, I was really happy to see you get through that one. So when you reach tough sections of the trail, did you tend to just slow your pace, or did you try to take breaks at all during the day?
Breaks were all kind of as needed or by feel. I would, like on that, I just fought through it, I guess, as much as I could, the climb to the Continental Divide. On the rougher sections, I think it was all based on like, okay, this is a big climb coming up. I'll eat because like 80% of my calories were really like calories per ounce, and 20% were more like psychological calories, where this food will taste good. So if something real hard was coming up, I'd get to use some of those psychological calories to be like, all right, you get to have this now and you get to earn it afterwards by getting up this hill, type of thing.
What were your psychological calories? What kind of foods?
These little like almond coconut chocolate things from Costco that are come in little balls that are just,
those are awesome.
and they're like 170 calories an ounce too.
They're
And
so good.
I would never buy them in real life, but for this, they were just amazing.
Yeah.
And then in the morning, chocolate covered coffee beans are prime.
Yeah. So as you kind of get through day 2 and 3, your GI issues settle down, you're through the San Juans, and you really got into this groove every day that continued almost to the end. And so how did you get into that, and did you plan that, or was that the tempo that you just kind of settled into as you went on?
Yeah, I think I settled into it quite a bit, because the first 3 days with the climbs, even up to like San Luis Peak area, is the terrain oscillates so much and changes that it's really hard to find any sort of routine. But when the climbs kind of change to 2,000 feet or less up and down kind of thing, it just felt so much easier to be in this groove of be up at a certain time, just kind of hike through. And then by the second half, I was just taking like 2 naps at night. So I'd take about an hour or 45 minutes, hour to an hour and a half of downtime, probably 45 minutes of sleeping between like 9 and 11 p.m. And then one more period like that just before sunrise to be recharged again. And in the middle, of course, there was the full moon and the skies were clear. So I think both the weather and the terrain kind of evening out a little bit more were both huge factors in finding more of a pattern than just like slogging up those San Juan mountains.
At what point did you feel like you were going through some sleep deprivation, and when did that evolve into hallucinations?
I would say like 3 days from the end. So day 7, I was like feeling like I was 80 to 90% a part of the world. Like it was like just walking through, almost like you're walking through an exhibit, or you're part of an exhibit, like it's behind the glass, but you're there. And then the last couple nights, I wouldn't have realized it, but there's a lot of weird stumps and sticks in Colorado, and it looked like some of them were crawling and things throughout the night, and just all strange things like that, where you see the world, what you see, isn't there, but it sure looks like it really is there. So.
Did you sleep through an alarm at all?
Yeah, I did. Definitely. Day 3, I woke up. It had rained the night before. I woke up, looked out, my alarm was going off, and it was light outside my tent. And it was
you
just
panic?
like, oh yeah. After the fact, Dylan, one of the guys filming, was like, yeah, you were like walking 4+ miles an hour. And it was like, yeah, because I was so scared that I'd slept through an alarm.
Right.
But I think it evened out because I overslept by 2 hours, but I pushed so hard that I made up pretty much as I'd wanted to. Maybe just had to walk 1 hour later in the night,
Yeah.
but that panic really spurred me to get moving.
Right, right. Did you do a final push at the end with less sleep, or did you try to keep your tempo?
I did a little bit, but yeah, I just didn't have it in me at the end. I thought maybe the cutting out all sleep, but my knees were starting to lock up and just being, I think a big thing is just going with everything I had. So unsupported, everything I had from Durango. I didn't have, I guess, all the tools of like electrolytes and stuff to
Right.
really be trying to, like, I would have loved to run down Waterton Canyon, but it was also 100 degrees and my electrolytes were gone. So I gave a push at the end, a shot, but I didn't have anything amazing at the end.
Right. You started off with about 18 pounds of food. How many calories per ounce did you target your food weight?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe around 140, 150.
Yeah. And then you think you lost 10, 12 pounds?
Yeah, I think at least a pound a day, especially with how skinny I look.
And then you got to the end and you're running on fumes because you ran out of food 24 hours before you finished. So at the point where you ate your last bit of food, what were you thinking?
So I'd planned to eat my last bit of food about 12 to 15 hours from when I finished. And then I was still got the record, but a little longer than kind of my stretch goal. So when I ate my last bit of food, it was like, okay, Jeff, well, you planned for this. This is how you wanted to do it.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, here we go. Like, just drink a little extra water. But yeah, it was a good lesson in, I've had the sleep deprivation before where it gets really weird with hallucinations and things. And then it kind of goes in waves. And that's how hunger went too, where I've done without food on hikes before, but never something this intense and without food right at the end. But it was kind of healthy well, not healthy maybe, but a good experience to see how it impacted me, where it's like, okay, if you can get through this 15 to 20 minutes where you really want food, then it won't come back for another couple hours. So
that's really good data.
Yeah. And it's way better to be without food than water. There's nothing worse. A craving for water does not go away.
Normally the Colorado Trail is pretty good in terms of water supply. Did you run into any issues?
No, the only one I thought I might have is right at the end at Bear Creek. And there turned out to be a couple puddles, and I just filled up just enough to get to the end from there.
Great. So you wore Hokas. How did they work?
I wore Hokas.
How did they work? And did they meet your expectations?
Yeah, I enjoyed the Hokas. I've switched to them in the last 6 months, and I always break in shoes a little before I wear them, but with 500 miles expecting of a shoe, I was a little hesitant to put any more than that on them.
Right.
So I went in with brand new shoes. And that's the one thing that I wish I would have run like 20 or 30 miles, because the first day I had kind of that break-in foot feeling where you have a couple toes that haven't settled into where they want to be. But that's my only complaint with them is they probably had enough life to break in for a few miles, but I was so hesitant to like blowing out a shoe with a day left that I didn't want to put anything extra on them.
Yeah, for sure. Did they survive okay, or did they fail at all during the trip other than complete blowout?
Yeah, they survived perfectly, like definitely worn with 500 miles of use. And I don't know if I'll wear them anymore, especially with some of the rugged rock and stuff they went over, but they held up really well for expectations, especially.
Yeah. So Maggie did a social media contest where if the person who predicted your finish time was correct, they won one of your shoes. Do you know who the winner is?
No, she hasn't looked it up for me yet, but we'll be mailing it out.
Sounds good. They better start building their shadow box display.
Yeah, like get a lot of anti-odor spray too.
So at what point during the trip did you notice your feet were really getting mangled?
I had this giant blister, which I took a video of me popping on day 3 that um, I noticed then that my feet were getting a few blisters, and it was mostly due to being stubborn about changing socks. I tried to
Yeah.
swap out socks when they got wet, but of course, when you're in a climb and you're in a rhythm, you're like, oh, I'll just get another hour or two. And I think that hour or two
Yeah.
that you're stubborn, that's when the damage happens.
Yeah.
But from day 3 on, I just that initial push getting into the San Juans and the wet weather, that's when I think a lot of damage was done. And from there, it was just like bits and pieces of tape to preserve them as long as I could. But I think like most hikes, the damage was done early by feeling invincible and neglecting care, and then kind of mitigate the consequences after that.
How did you deal with knowing that your feet were in pretty bad shape early on, and then knowing that you still had all this trail to go? I mean, you've had this data before, but how did your previous experience with mangled feet contribute to managing it this time?
Yeah, it went from once I noticed and decided to make a conscious effort to be better about my feet, I immediately, every time I would change socks, I'd try to put like basically one piece of tape on the lower inside of my foot where there was a blister and one under one of the toes. And it was like, if there was even any discomfort, even after 10 steps, I'd stop and adjust it.
Yeah.
And it was just like, we're going to go at this the best I can from here. And it changed from, okay, this is good enough, it'll be okay, which turned into the feet having some blister issues, to let's just have everything set up. Because even if I walk 10 steps and I don't like it, I could walk 10 miles, but it'll suck. But if I just make it a little better now, I'll be way happier in 10 miles.
And you took what, 3 pairs of socks?
I was going to take 3, but I cut it to 2. I wish I would have taken 3 pairs.
Yeah. And then you washed them?
Just the backcountry wash of rub them together and slap the dirt out and throw them back on.
Yeah,
dry them on your pack.
That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
So in terms of gear, what didn't you use and what would you have left behind? 2 different questions, probably.
So I didn't use a stove or anything like that. Didn't have.
But you didn't take one.
No, didn't take one. I used just about everything. I have like little things, like took Benadryl because I'm allergic to yellow jackets, just a couple tabs. Didn't have to use that, thankfully. Let's see. So what was the other part of that question?
Well, what would you have left behind?
Left behind. I might have come up with a better system for charging, because that was a pretty heavy block I had for 9 days, and it still had like a quarter left.
Okay.
But I was just so nervous about basically just my phone and gut hook. I hadn't, and especially getting to the last 70 or so miles, which I've done or experienced most of the trail other than that. And just with the dirt roads and stuff around Denver, even though it's well signed, I would have hated to be sleep deprived and not be able to see on gut hook where I was supposed to go.
There's a ton of intersections in that area.
Oh yeah. So I just was so nervous my phone would die and I'd walk the wrong way down a trail or die before I needed an alarm or something, that I kind of exaggerated the amount of battery power I would need.
For sure. So I always envision an FKT as a Venn diagram where you've got one circle as skills, another one is training, another one is kind of grit, and then this other one that's luck. And the 2 pieces of luck I saw on your trip that really went in your favor, other than the first cold front, was this cold front coming in, which is expected to bring the widest temperature drop, or the highest temperature drop in decades through the Rockies. And then the other one is this, there's a huge wildfire in Rocky Mountain National Park, or near there, the Cameron Peak fire. And that, I mean, I'm in Breckenridge right now. It's completely smoked out here. It's terrible.
It is today here too, but not yesterday.
So how do you, did you think about the contribution of luck to your trip in the beginning, and how do you feel about it right now?
So yeah, I think all those three pieces of the diagram minus luck, I had pretty well ironed out. And then there was people complaining about wildfires before I went on,
Right.
attempted this FKT, and they asked like, oh, how are you going to deal with the smoke? And it's like, well, I just planned on doing it. Now I'm just going to hope it works out. And like either the wind was blowing the right way or some rain or something, but I never had substantial smoke. And I think that is a huge part of the ability to do it, because I do have asthma too. And it's enough just being at elevation without smoke in your lungs that I think maybe that grit could have overshadowed it, but it would have been a lot tighter finish than if I hadn't had perfect weather. It was really, I couldn't have had better luck as far as the weather. And, you know, you can't do something like this and not hope for a little rain or snow, because then there's not a good story in it or something.
Right. For sure. Speaking of story, what was it like hiking knowing that a film crew was trying to capture all this?
So it was unique. We had a talk right before I did it, and I told them, basically we're not gonna interact or even make eye contact at all. And then personally since I wanted to do unsupported, it's like, well, I think can't really get away from texting these days with like my family and stuff, but I decided I'm not going to make any phone calls, or I'm not going to communicate with the outside world for emotional support. So setting these boundaries personally to make it as unsupported or completely just powered by my own desire to do it made it really cool. And then the film crew thing was like, it turned out there were a couple people on it that I didn't even know. So it was almost more weird than anything. Like, here's someone yelling or taking a photo. Well, not really yelling, but just like 20 feet down a dirt road taking a photo of me. And it's like, what? I don't even know. Is that a hiker or paparazzi or something?
Right.
But yeah, just setting the guidelines up front made it really good, where it was, I guess it could have been weird, whereas like it's almost we were in two different worlds. Like if you say a Venn diagram that didn't overlap, but the piece that was I guess me, but our experiences in just talking to him in the last 24 hours where it's like we had two different adventures, but they both captured kind of the same thing. It's actually really unique way, because that's what we wanted to show, is like a way to do an adventure, but it's also, you think it's an impossible thing to film. So just coming up with the best way possible to inspire people. Like, you can go out in your own backyard, especially in COVID times or something, and hike for 4 days with everything you can carry and not have to go anywhere except for back to your car. I think it's kind of a cool way. And it's, I guess in general, the Colorado Trail, having lived here and done most of every 14er and most of the trails and stuff through, especially the Front Range and the San Juans and Nolan's 14, it was like, if I'm going to do the Colorado Trail, it has to be something different than just through hike and going to like Salida, because I've done all that. And so this year presented the unique opportunity to, I've always wanted to see what I could do unsupported. Like, okay, you left the terminus, like good luck with what you have with you. And this turned into the year to do that. And then the filming opportunity came along, and it's like, well, this is just so crazy. I think we might be able to pull it off.
Yeah, it was so cool. We were up here when you crossed State Highway 6, and I wanted to go down and just kind of get a glimpse of the tiger, but we held back and stayed in town. I just wanted to let you do your thing. So really, really happy that you did it in this style, and I think it's great. So final question, can this FKT be beaten? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think it can be broken with especially that luck part of the Venn diagram. I think also if I had done this entire hike from Durango to Denver as a scouting trip too, I think that could have gained or even the other way. So if you yo-yoed it and hiked out to scout everything, to know, which I've liked to do with some FKTs, to know like current conditions at current times and water sources to expect and stuff. I think that's one of the biggest ways, if someone's really investing in a major FKT or something, that's the best way to beat an FKT, or to give yourself the best chance, is you already know exactly what you're going to go through. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest advice, because from nutrition to gear to everything, that's so personalized, but just having as much knowledge about what's going to be coming at you is probably the best advice for beating an unsupported FKT. Yeah. I would say if someone is going to go after it, be prepared for kind of the wildest ride, because once you leave Durango, you have 500 miles worth of stuff on your back, and that's all you get. Like you don't get to get more sunscreen. You just have to roast.
Yeah. So. It's intense, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's fun, but it's something else.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jeff, thank you very much. Good luck, get some rest, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Our next interview is between me and some members of the film crew that captured Jeff's journey. I think it's a great conversation that touches on the nuts and bolts of backcountry filmmaking, but it also gets at the heart of what the FKT attempt was about. Here we go. Nik and Dylan, welcome to the Backpacking Live podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, and my cat, which just meowed right as I said that, so that's fine. We'll roll with that.
All right.
So let's just start out by, can you guys just fill me in on what roles you had on the film?
Yeah, I guess I'll do a little introduction first. Yeah, my name's Dylan Harris, based out of Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a freelance filmmaker, photographer, kind of overall creative. And on this particular film with Jeff Garmire, it was my job to sort of direct storyline. But I would say, as I think Nik will agree, we kind of are a do-it-all sort of crew. So,
and how about you, Nik? What was your primary job on the film?
Yeah, so like Dylan was saying, we kind of just jumped on this project together. I have been for the project. I was definitely like help with the camera work, director of photography, kind of like just making sure everything looked good and all of that jazz. Yeah, we had several different camera operators, but a lot of them asked for help just in regards to like exposure and what they think they should get and stuff like that. And Dylan can probably concur about with that as well.
So I'll circle back around to that in a little bit, because I'm for sure interested in how you went about actually creating the film. But to start with, how did this project, what was the genesis of this project?
Yeah, so actually me and Nik were working on a potential TV show with Jeff. And I actually know Jeff just from the thru hiking community. And basically what had happened is, we're working on this TV show, and Jeff's whole year has kind of gone to awry. He had all these major plans, and he's even vocally said that this year was going to be his biggest year in terms of I guess accolades, you could say, if that's what you call them in the thru hiking community. I don't know. But all those plans, went away because of COVID and because of the pandemic, and a lot of these long distance trails that he was going to hike, they shut down. And so the Colorado Trail, for whatever reason, I actually haven't looked into it too much, but the Colorado Trail stayed open to thru hikers. And so because the Colorado Trail is more accessible to thru hikers later on in the season, because of it being up in Alpine, later on in the summer, I should say, it kind of gave that leeway and time of Jeff to sort of make a decision on the trail, whether he's going to hike it or not. And I think it was probably a month out when Jeff told me that he was thinking about setting the FKT, the unsupported FKT, on the Colorado Trail. Instantly, as I do, I was like, well, I'm with you. And And so that's kind of how that started. And it probably was only 2 weeks out from the start date to where, we were really saying like, okay, it's a go 100%. I would say it was no more than 2 weeks away till start date to when it was like, okay, this is 100% go, which made it pretty exciting, as you can imagine.
As a filmmaker, have you ever done a project like this? And as a corollary to that question, what did you have to do? What kind of scrambling did you have to do to get ready to go in that 2-week time period?
So no, the answer is no. By training, I'm a photographer. That's what I do. And so I've only really gotten into filmmaking over the last year and a half. It's been working with people like Nik, working with other people in the industry where I've kind of learned enough to get by. But it's really been, just like trial by error and kind of learning on my own stuff. I think the reason why Jeff was inclined to utilize a guy like me is because I've made pretty much all the work I've done in terms of photography and the stuff that I enjoy shooting is all involves being in the backcountry. So, I've hiked a lot of long distance trails and I always am carrying my camera gear, that kind of stuff. So I feel comfortable outside. I understand the environment, and that was a big part of our film.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I mean, we're obviously not going nonstop like Jeff, but that was a part of the film. Something we realized kind of pretty soon on is, we'll be up at 12,000 feet, do a 5-6 mile hike up this pass. And just like Jeff's getting destroyed by this storm, we're huddled over camera gear trying to make sure, $10,000 of camera gear is not going down the hole while we're getting dumped on with hail and all that kind of stuff. So, there was being comfortable outside was a big part of it. To an extent, there aren't films exactly like what we were pursuing here with Jeff. There are films out there on unsupported fastest known times, but they're all done with a point of view camera, like a GoPro or something of that sort, where they might have an editor or something come back and put those clips together and tell the story from the back end. It was our goal to try and tell the story as it's happening, which was quite a challenge. And we learned a lot. And not only did we have the challenge of making that film, trying to access this guy who's walking through the backcountry, and obviously we can't keep up with him. But at the same time, we're trying to follow the guidelines of the fastest known time, which is its own entity. And they're the ones who kind of make the laws, make the rules on what's allowed, right? And so there were a lot of things we have to follow, a lot of rules we had to follow. But oftentimes, like Nik knows out there, a lot of times we were making our own rules. We had to kind of work on our own ethics and morals and go by, okay, how are we going to be held, like, if no one's out here holding us accountable to how we're shooting this film, how are we going to decide to do this on our own? So that was a big thing for us. And that was honestly major credit to Jeff and Maggie.
Definitely.
But yeah, Jeff was not right from the beginning. There was zero leeway on shooting this film. It was by the book, and we weren't going to take any chances for sure.
So just in case we haven't talked about this earlier in the podcast, one of the challenges here is that Jeff took this idea of unsupported very seriously, even to the extent that he wasn't sending or receiving satellite messenger messages, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that, I imagine, was a large part of what you're talking about in terms of like, how do you logistically make this film if you can't communicate with your subject, right?
Exactly. So that was the huge thing. And that's kind of what actually did take some preparation. It was sort of imagining how this film would go, and it was kind of predicting the future. And then as we learned quickly, it was rolling with the punches. And I know quickly I had to kind of give up on an idea that I wanted to hold on to so bad, just to move on to the next idea that was really carrying the film at that point. And it was craziness. I mean, you imagine a guy like Nik, so basically what we would do is,
Yeah.
we'd split into two, and oftentimes, we'd have Nik down in more of an accessible area, where he can do a little bit better camera work. And then I would be with a crew who would take me up really high. So we'd get up to, the more scenic up high shots, but you can get a little bit less gear up there. And so it was kind of,
it's not like you're going to carry a 30-pound camera in the woods,
Yeah, exactly. It was just rolling with those punches, basically.
So what kind of gear were you guys using?
Yeah, Nik, you go ahead on that.
All right, so we had a bunch of different cameras that we were using. So I had a Blackmagic camera that I was using for me that I used. Dylan had a Sony A7 III that he was using. Those were basically the main cameras that we would shoot on. Now Jeff also carried with him a DJI Osmo that for like video diaries along the way. That way we could kind of get interviews of him while he was hiking in like different areas and different like types of, like different types of what do you call it? Like the weather, like it's, like the weather was different. Like, so we have stuff where it's raining, we have stuff where it's really hot, we have stuff where it's snowing, and things that he would encounter along the way, like cows and moose and all that stuff. Like he documented all of that and he carried it with him, which is nice because those are things we're not able to get ourselves.
Right.
So along with those, we also had drones. We had 2 drones that we would fly as well. And a lot of times we would use the drone to go scout, to find, like, we would know that he would be close by. So we would take a drone out and go find him. And then someone like me would be following him along the drone. We would be following him once we found him. And then we would figure out, because the drones tell you how far away the drone is from where you are. And so we would know he would be like a mile or so out. And so we would all get ready with the cameras, and like the photographer, everybody would all get ready with the cameras. That way when he came by, we could get it on that angle as well. So I would be following him along up top with the drone, following him, while other people would get the same angle from the different cameras as he passed by. So, there's a lot of different ways we got it without having to really be around him a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's really smart, because I'd imagine for battery saving purposes, he had the breadcrumbs on his GPS pretty spaced out. So that was way more accurate tracking him with the drone.
Yeah, he did have the tracker with him, but he also did carry, like, I think he had 2 or 3 portable, like, of those battery bases, just so he could charge his phone and charge, like, if he needed to charge the camera he carried with him. So he did carry those as well, but besides anything else, he just had food with him.
So the Blackmagic is this is just to fill in those listeners who may not be like super into camera gear. The Blackmagic is a dedicated video camera, right?
Correct. It's up there with like Red and those. It's up there with those with
right.
That type of quality.
Right, but it's also it's pretty compact, right? I imagine it was a good camera for this type of thing.
Yeah, it is pretty compact, because it's the pocket one that I have. I have the new Pocket 6K, so it's pretty small. I mean, it's not like a DSLR. It's a little larger than a DSLR, but it's not quite as big as like a Red camera or an ARRI camera or anything like that. It's in the middle. They call it a pocket, but it doesn't fit in your pocket, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Definitely not.
Right.
And Dylan, you were using the Sony A7
III.
A7 III, which is a mirrorless SLR, right? I mean, not mirrorless camera. It's not a mirrorless SLR, but it's a mirrorless camera.
Yeah, basically, I mean, you're exactly right. Like your questions are exactly right. Basically, we were utilizing the smallest gear we could use to give us the most like cinematic kind of look.
Yeah,
our goal very much was to take, at least my main goal, and honestly, like between you and I, even though we're on a podcast right now, my goal is to make Jeff look cinematic. I don't know why. I think it's just the way Jeff is that I just want to capture like his being in this cinematic way for whatever reason, just because he's always, he's always kind of goofing around, and most of the stuff he does is like on his own camera, and
Right.
Anyways, he appreciates it, I guess, is what I could say. But yeah, so our goal was to use the smallest gear we could use, carry in the mountains in the backcountry, also give us the best quality. And that was the same for the drones. Obviously the drones is a big one. That's
It's a big one.
We never knew how important the drones would be. If we did know, we probably would have brought one or two more just in case.
Yeah.
But, knock on wood, everything went great. But yeah, the drones was huge. I mean, to be able to be up at 10, 12,000 feet where you don't have cell signal, because you can't, without cell signal, you can't see Jeff on his GPS. You don't know exactly where he is. So to be able to fly the drone a mile away, be able to spot him through the trees, fly the drone back, and then get the whole crew prepared to get the shot was, it was the biggest game changer. So, and then,
it definitely was, for sure.
Yeah. And then, I was, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dylan.
I was just going to say, I never really answered your question. Yeah, I was using the Sony A7R III. It's great it's a little mirrorless camera. And I use but it packs a punch. I don't know. But so basically our roles was, my Sony was going to be the run and gun camera. And then Nik's Blackmagic was going to be the interview camera, and kind of like if we were able to
B-roll,
set up a really nice, like B-roll and really nice walk-bys, that kind of stuff. That's what we were shooting with Nik's setup.
And favorite lenses for each of you?
Oh, favorite lenses? The one that I use on my Blackmagic that pretty much stays on it the whole time is the Sigma 18-35.
Okay, so nice and wide.
The ART. It's a really nice camera. It's a really nice lens.
Yeah, and then I use the one that I use probably 90% of the time is a 24-70, 2.8.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So between the two of you, you have a good range there. Was that intentional, or is that just a personal preference that worked out in your favor?
It just worked out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Nik was already shooting with. And for me, the 24-70, when I know just from doing my own thing in the backcountry, the 24-70, oftentimes you're shooting, your subject is obviously a small subject in a big landscape, right? So to be able to have a little bit more zoom there is useful. Whereas for the stuff Nik was doing, was a bit more intimate usually.
Yeah.
He didn't
a lot of the interviews
reach
that we did were on my camera, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And did you guys do interviews like in the downtime between setting up to get a shot of Jeff? Is that kind of how you structured the schedule?
Yes, we did do it that way. There were times we got an interview in the beginning before Jeff left, like a couple of days before he left before the Colorado Trail. I think Dylan got that one. And then during the actual trail attempt, while we were waiting for Jeff at certain areas, there would be times we would be like, hey, let's just grab an interview real quick about where we are and stuff like that, and kind of talk about how it's going,
Oh, so you would interview each other, like interview the crew.
We interviewed the crew as well, yeah. So
so that's basically, this is what I think is going to make this film special, and it's what's special to me, honestly, is because. So like we were saying, how Jeff was carrying the DJI Osmo, which is a little handheld
Steadicam
device. Yeah, it's no bigger than the length of your hand, right? But it's skinny, it's skinnier, but it shoots great video. And so Jeff was using that, and we would call it the journal. So Jeff would journal, mandatory twice a day, but Jeff did a great job and would report to that thing probably like more 4 to 8 times a day.
Yeah, definitely
Mhm.
has that. Yeah.
But the thing is there's all this footage that's happening during this entire 9-day record where we have no idea what's going on. So there's no way to kind of
Yeah.
structure a storyline based on if Jeff's having ups or downs, or things are going wrong or things are going great. We have no idea. So basically what we kind of developed the film into was taking the crew's experience through following the guidelines, Maggie's experience through receiving a GPS message from Jeff saying like that things are okay, or whatever. It was those experiences. Also, some of the most impactful interviews we did usually were the ones that were happening in real time, just like a handheld interview where maybe
Yeah.
we had our one guy, Austin Brunig. He ran like logistics. He's hiked the trail twice, and he set up the crew in all the most beautiful spots, and then it was our
And
job to go get the shot right.
areas. Yeah, and he knew areas that were accessible for the crew to get Jeff. So there would be areas on the map. He would map it out, say you can catch him here, 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 and here. Let's hike to this area. We can catch him at this area, and it'll look great. So he knew everything very, very well, and it just made our production value so much better.
Oh yeah, Austin. We would have been. It would be half the film without Austin. I mean, not even half. It'd be a fourth. He crushed it. But it was some of those interviews where Austin would get back to, because Maggie wasn't allowed to go up with us. So say we were 5 miles up this 4x4 road up a pass, and then we hiked up even further to get shots. Maggie would have to stay back off trail because by FKT guidelines, they're not allowed to see a significant other while setting the record. So we had to keep Maggie off. So half the time, we'd have the entire crew coming back, reporting to Maggie and, saying like, oh, this is, we wouldn't be right next to Jeff. Oftentimes we'd be off trail quite a bit, but we were always reporting to Maggie like, oh, this is what Jeff looked like. Oh, he looked strong. He was, he wasn't limping or something, just to keep spirits high often.
Yeah. There were times where we would also show her the clips that we would get just based on where we were and how he looked.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of those scenes in Free Solo when they cut away from Alex on the wall and they're just focusing on the crew who are his friends, watching him through the scope. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from you guys on this.
Exactly. That we took to be transparent, we took direct inspiration from Free Solo. I mean, that movie is fantastic, but it was more so exactly what you said. They've got friends in the crew. They've got people out there who understand to an extent what Alex, or what we had to an extent being through hikers, and some of the people we had on the crew, they understand to an extent what Jeff is going through, but also we've never really been quite there. So there was like that bit of excitement and inspiration happening within the crew just to see, it's hard to put into words, and hopefully we can put it into a film. I mean, that's our job. What it feels like for one of your best buddies to walk by you after not sleeping for 36 hours and is 55 miles into a day or something like that. It's hard to put into words, for sure.
It really is, and it's hard to see like those, like what Dylan was talking about, those journals. It's hard to see some of the stuff that he went through and some of the stuff that he documented himself, actually, because there's shots on there of him like puking and like popping blisters because of how hard, and showing how hard it was and all the stuff he went through. Like, it's really hard to watch that because he's by himself and he's not able to get help with anybody and he's hurting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow. This is the power of filmmaking, though, right?
Right.
Because that's what struck me when you said it's hard to put into words. You don't have to, because you're filmmakers, and that's what is awesome about it.
Exactly.
So can you give me a couple of examples of maybe something that went wrong in the shooting process that you had to think quickly or scramble to overcome?
Oh man.
Exactly.
I mean, there were, other than the normal, stuff, we had some stuff break, forgot some stuff. I forgot one of my camera mounts in Arizona, and that camera mount is what linked my camera to almost all my pieces of gear, my stabilizer, my tripod.
Oh,
It was like the one piece that linked everything together. But luckily I had a filmmaker buddy who lives in Durango, and he fixed all those solutions and set us up with everything, even an extra drone, which was awesome.
Yeah, didn't you guys didn't your rental car have a flat tire or something at some point?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that happened, but
Yeah, no, we
we
just
woke up one
with a
morning and we had a flat
yeah.
tire.
Yeah, that but actually no, I'm
Not
starting
really sure how that
I'm starting
happened,
to
but we
remember.
woke up with a flat. So.
I'm starting to remember some it's all coming back to me now. I'd say one of the naturally one of the most unique nights on trail or on the production was the last night that Jeff was out there. We drove over, we were probably at this point only, we were like probably 27 miles away from Waterton Canyon, which is the end of the trail for Jeff. And we had been sitting down in this town. Yeah, we were sitting down in this little town with cell service, and we all had a beer because man, we needed it, and we were eating some food, and we were just sitting there in this town following his tracker, being like, okay, well, we don't want to go up there and lose signal too early, then we can't, we don't know what's going on, because in the beginning it was all smooth sailing. Jeff's walking 4 miles an hour uphill, 4 miles an hour downhill, 4 miles an hour on the flat. Like, he is a literal machine.
Yes,
and so you can be like, you can literally plan on when Jeff's going to be somewhere the day prior. He's just that automatic. It's crazy. But then towards the end, that all changed, and we didn't know how to deal with it. And so I think we showed up to this interstate crossing. Anyone who's hiked the Colorado Trail, and I'm terrible with names, but you cross the interstate there. It's one of the last major ones where there's a fire station there, and there's a water spigot. So people who walk the trail, they all know
that's
it,
just
right?
on the other side of there's a burn zone there, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so we're sitting there waiting for him, and we barely have signal. I think each of us we'll get a bar here and there, and we're all like, is yours working? Is yours working? No, mine's not working, kind of thing. We thought Jeff was going to be there around midnight or 12:30.
Yeah.
So we showed up at
that's right. We
11
thought it was 11
p.m.
o'clock.
We showed up at 11 p.m. and he didn't walk past us till I think 5:45 a.m. the next day.
Wow.
And he was, I think he was, for 13 hours, he was averaging 1 mile an hour. He just kept stopping. He would fall asleep. He'd have to sit down because of his feet. He couldn't move very much. And I'm pretty sure, it wasn't until the next day when he got that sunlight and he was in the burn zone where he was able to finish strong. But we literally were all had all of our gear set up around all of our vehicles. We're sitting there pacing around. No one knows what to do. And I think we
all fell asleep for an hour or so at one point.
Yeah, Nik fell asleep sitting up for sure. But by the last day, by the last day we got to the trailhead, and none of us had slept more than an hour in the last 2 days. So
yeah, it was pretty bad.
It was something for the crew. Absolutely.
So it wasn't just an experience for Jeff going through, the hike in the 9 days. It was also an experience for the crew because, like Dylan had just said, we were up all hours of the night, not sleeping a lot as well, because we wanted to capture them at these hours, in these different climates and all these different areas, whatever time it was. So it wasn't just for him. It was also an experience for us as well.
Was it harder than you thought it would be, or was it exactly as hard as you thought it would be?
I think Nik I think Nik just shows up That's why we freaking bring Nik with us everywhere. And that, because Nik just shows up
job,
and he's like, Nik is so good at like, all right, well, whatever's happening, here we go.
We're staying up all night. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, let's go. And we all fell asleep we all fell asleep at like 2 a.m. We're like, he's not coming through. We all wake up at like 4 o'clock. He's still not there. And then all of a sudden, I remember Dylan frantically getting into the van, being like, dude, we got to go find him. I don't know where he's at, but we got to go find him. And he gets in the van. And he just sails down the road. And all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, he comes flying back and he goes, yep, he's crossing the road. It was just really funny. Yeah.
So Dylan, you drove far enough down the road to get service, found him on the map.
No. Like he actually physically saw him crossing the road. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw him with a headlamp in the woods. It was this unique area. And we had been waiting for so long. And I was like, if
we
I
were
wasn't
panicked a little bit because we didn't know where he was.
If I wasn't completely psychotic on this whole production, I was right on the fringe. I'll tell you what, I was losing my mind the entire time. But that's why I was that's why. I mean, so you want to talk about like post production and all that kind of stuff. Literally, Maggie and Jeff, to an extent, produced this entire film. I mean, it's basically self-funded. And, because it was a last minute project, we weren't able to get funding from brands or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So all of this thing is self-funded. So I forget where I was going with that. It was probably a great thing I was going to say. No, I'm just messing.
I mean, now that we did it and we have all this footage, I think what we're trying to do now is trying to get a sponsor backing for it. Like, sure. Hey, we have all this footage we did for this guy who wants to like do all these records. And so like, would you guys be interested in sponsoring it and kind of a little bit of help get back those funds that we put up ourselves, you know what I mean? Or at least Jeff and Maggie put up for themselves, you know what I mean?
Right. So just for anybody interested who's listening who might be considering doing something like this, what does that process look like? Do you cut together a sizzle reel or a trailer and shop it around? Is that how it works?
Yeah. So actually me and Dylan both put something together. So Dylan has one that's kind of showcasing the lifestyle of what a thru hiker does and what the Colorado Trail is about. It's kind of showcases like here's this guy, Jeff, this is what he does type of thing. And then I put together a little bit of a longer one that kind of showcases a little bit more on the story of what we want to tell and how we want to tell it.
How many hours of footage did you have at the end of day 9?
Oh man, we are.
Oh gosh. Oh yeah, man.
It's somewhere.
Man. We have a 4 terabyte hard drive, and I think we've used 3.5 terabytes of it. So it's I don't know. It's somewhere in the ballpark of maybe 100, maybe a little more. 100 hours, would you say?
No, I think it's more, my ballpark is more between like 15 to 20 hours of footage.
You think? I think there's more than that, but I don't know.
Did you guys shoot, did you shoot 4K?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have to think that 100 hours at 4K is more than 3.5 terabytes.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's probably about 20 hours. Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if the reason why we, I took this project is because I knew it was going to be a challenge. Obviously that's exciting.
Right.
And, this day and age, especially with like photography, filmmaking, even podcasts, like we're doing right now, there's this overwhelming feeling of like, gosh, everything has been done. It's like, what am I doing? What am I giving to the world? And I'd say it's very rare. I mean, I've been doing this for 7-8 years now. It's very rare for somebody to, present you with an opportunity that's kind of new, where something hasn't been done. And so, I mean, to be a part of something like that, there's a lot of room for failure, and we all knew that coming in.
Right.
We knew that this could not go well because it's not like Jeff is hiring Jimmy Chin from Free Solo, to be like, hey, you know what you did there? Like, can you do it here? he's
Right.
bringing on guys who, he trusts. This is all a personal project. We brought on friends.
No, yeah, what Dylan said is 100% accurate. Like, at least on my side of things, I'm new to this whole outdoor world, so I had never, I mean, yeah, I've done some outdoor things before, but like to this extent, it was a very new experience. And I think the really cool part about this whole movie and the whole experience was the fact that there was me on the production side, knowing how to capture this type of thing, but not really knowing how to deal with it, and knowing the production of it and knowing exposures and how we should capture things this way. But then the other side of things, where we had Austin, we had Kevin and Dylan that are part of the outdoor world and know these things and know what the audience wants. So it was actually a really interesting experience for me because of the fact that I brought my part of it to them, not knowing any of the outdoor side of it. And so they brought that part of it. So it's kind of a learning experience for both, actually.
Yeah, it was definitely something trying to convince Nik that, shooting a shot at, 8:30 p.m. at like 14,000 ISO or whatever. It looks grainy.
It looks hella grainy, but
yeah, looks terrible. It's special in its own right, to have somebody walk by with a headlamp where you can barely make out a silhouette. There's something powerful about an image like that,
and then
that you don't see in normal movies, normal films.
There was that part where I don't remember where we were, but it was when we were. Dylan will probably be able to tell us where it's at. But there was that area where we were in the truck, and we were waiting for him, and we walked down that. It was by the mine, that abandoned mine.
Oh, sure, yeah.
When we were in the truck, and we all ran down the hill to go find him, and we waited for he was only like 2 miles from the last time we had caught him before, and so we knew he was going to be there very, very soon, and so we were in the truck waiting for him, and he wasn't showing up, and so we ran down to the where he might have been to see maybe wait for him there, and we got our shots all set up and everything, and he still wasn't there, and it was like an hour and a half had passed, and he still wasn't there, and so we sent somebody out to go see if we could maybe find him, and maybe he was like camping somewhere. Didn't see him either, so we just ran back to the truck, and we sat there, and as soon as we were probably in the truck, maybe 2 minutes, a headlamp pops up right in the middle of the woods, and we go, oh, there he is. And so we all ran right back down the hill, and the way Jeff runs, and the way he walks, we all ran like full on sprint to get all the way to the end. And by the time we got there, how fast Jeff walks, he was pretty much already crossing the area we wanted to get him. So it was like get your camera ready to go as we're running, because by the time we get there, he's going to be there. That's how fast Jeff walks.
Oh yeah, you can't even count the amount of times that our entire crew was on a full-on sprint.
We were running, getting our stuff, turning our cameras on, making sure all of it looked fine, and then we would get to the spot, and we're all out of breath, and we're all like, heavy breathing, and then all of a sudden Jeff walks by, and we're like, okay, great, I'm glad we got that shot, and then we all ran back to the car. So, the experiences we had, and just, it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of fun, but it was also very, very hard on the body, and very hard on just everything, just because of the fact that our sleep schedules were bad. I mean, not to mention what Jeff went through, but our sleep schedules were really bad as well. So I remember there being one time, I think 4 people or 5 people slept in the little van we had, in the little van that we had. Like, there was someone on the bed. I slept in the chair, and I think someone else slept on the ground of the van. So it was like, yeah, it was rough.
So just to start wrapping things up,
Sure.
Dylan, are you involved in the post-production here as well?
Yeah. Actually, Nik and I are both working on post-production. It's one of those things right now where, the film is a bit in limbo, but we're trying to push forward as we can. Like we mentioned, for Nik and I, Maggie and Jeff included, this is a personal project to an extent. I mean, we definitely see a lot of potential in it, but to an extent, this is a personal project. So, like you hear, Nik is literally on set for a film right now. And, I am working all kinds of freelance jobs here in Arizona right now. And so it's sort of this thing where we're staying organized. We stay in contact every week with Jeff and Maggie. And, we try and set hard goals to kind of keep moving forward. So right now we're basically in the process of reaching out to brands, getting a little bit of funding here and there. And then we're also developing the entire storyline. And so Nik and I will be a part of most of the edits, but we have a couple buddies in the industry who will help with some of the, technical things and that kind of stuff. So.
Do you see this being a feature? Was this always intended to be a feature?
This film is.
Yeah, we actually just had like a big.
It has potential to go a few different ways because
sure.
It sort of depended on the money that came in for the production afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
But right now we're very confident in kind of making a film festival type film. So
absolutely.
We're leaning towards the 35 to 45 minute range
mm-hmm.
Of some good old compact fun. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably even make it an hour. With the amount of footage that we have, an hour is probably doable.
Yeah, the thing is, there's something like this where you can kind of dive in. Like we could spend 15, 20 minutes on introducing Jeff, talking about his life growing up, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Sort of like an introduction to Jeff. Or we can make it more like you see maybe on YouTube a lot now, Vimeo, that kind of stuff, where you see those short docs where they kind of get right into the introduction of what's happening,
right?
And sort of spend less time on the kind of getting people up to speed, the audience up to speed with everything. So we're going to land somewhere in the middle. We have a lot, but like I said, our goal is to make it high quality for sure.
And it's definitely high quality.
So yeah, we've got the shots, which is good. And we all feel confident in that. So.
And I think Dylan talked about it before about how we want it to be cinematic. It's definitely has a cinematic feel to it.
We will definitely keep our audience apprised of how things are going, and please stay in touch and let us know when the film's done and when you start submitting it to festivals, because we'd love to follow it as it moves through the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I was a little not hesitant, but on kind of reporting on the film. I love talking about how we filmed it and stuff, and I do think it's an incredible story, and I hope we can show that in the film. That's our goal, at least. But as of where we're at right now, we really are in a little bit of a limbo. So we're ready to move forward. We're excited to move forward, but there's things we're learning. I've never really created a film that has potential to go to a little bit bigger audience. So, we're trying to be patient and make all the right moves, as I'm sure you can understand. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see what happens from here.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, take care. And our final interview is with Maggie Slepian. Maggie's chat with Ryan came about a month after Jeff set the record, and we think it sheds some light onto the unique circumstances friends and family are in when observing an FKT attempt.
All right. Hi, Maggie. Thanks for joining us on the Backpacking Life podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start out by asking you, what was your role in helping Jeff prepare for the Colorado FKT? We'll talk about what went on during the hike itself, but I want to know what you did with him to prepare for it prior to the trip.
My role with Jeff before the FKT was mostly me bouncing around anxiously asking if he needed help and him saying, no, not really, but thanks anyway. We went to Costco together and I helped him count calories on snacks. But no, really, this is Jeff's realm. And I guess all that my job was before we started was taking logistical things off of his shoulders so he could think about the record. And so I helped get the film crew together and I helped kind of plan the timing and trajectory so he didn't have to think about that.
Yeah, I know throughout my years of expeditioning, whether it's been for my own personal trips or leading scout high adventure trips or anything like that, Stephanie's been a huge help in dealing with logistics so that I could kind of focus on trip prep, and that's always been super valuable. So
Yeah, exactly.
once Jeff left the trailhead in Durango, walk me through the typical day-to-day tempo of what you and your crew were doing.
So once Jeff took off, we started out by splitting up into two different cars and sending cars to different locations to find him with the GPS locator and then try to get a shot as he walked by. And so basically, each morning we would see his latest ping from the GPS. And then we would look at the map and we'd look at the interception points that our logistics guy had put together. And we'd say, okay, he's probably moving at 3.5 miles an hour. So he's probably going to hit this point around 10:30 a.m. and this point at 5 p.m. So we'd send out the two different cars to those spots. And we would just try to plan the day based on Jeff's mileage and where they thought he was going to be. And from there, I would send out those cars and I would stay behind because I couldn't be anywhere near the trailhead because I'm his girlfriend and that would have been emotional support. And so
Right.
I would, once they left for their locations, I would probably be in the closest trail town, just doing work on the computer. I answered media questions and trying to start planning out the next day's locations for the crew.
So was his strategy not to have contact with anybody, any part of the crew, or primarily you?
The strategy was to have no contact with the crew at all. And then we took it one step further by not having me anywhere near the trailhead or his locations. And so, yeah, he didn't speak to the crew. He didn't know where they were going to be. I had all the paperwork and I had all the locations with me and the crew, but Jeff didn't have any of those. So they would kind of scout out the spots. They found him via drone when he was within a mile or two of the trailhead. And then they would set up and just get him as he walked by. They never acknowledged him. And I think there were some points on the trail where he didn't even know that they were there because they were just squatting in the bushes.
Yeah,
So yeah, he had no contact with anybody and I wasn't anywhere even like within a couple miles of him.
what was that like for you?
It was awful. I actually hated it a lot more than I thought I would. At first, the first couple of days were fun and almost celebratory because he was doing really well and he was absolutely crushing it. And the crew would report back to me that he had shown up 30 minutes before they expected him to, which meant that he was walking really fast and feeling really strong. And at that point, I missed him because I live with him and we're together kind of all the time. But I was still really excited to see their footage of him and see how he was doing. And then as it got further along, it stopped being celebratory and fun. And it was just watching someone have a very hard time as he was doing it to himself. And it got to the point where I remember thinking like on day 4 or 5, like, okay, this isn't fun anymore. Why is he doing this? This looks horrible. Like they'd show me
Yeah.
footage of him doing poorly, or he would have been 3 hours behind their estimate based on like his previous hike and Austin's knowledge of the terrain. And it was really hard to know that he was having a hard time, even though it was his choice and he did it to himself, because that's what he does. But it was very hard to know that he was having a hard time out there all by himself.
Yeah, I can imagine. I had a hard time watching him.
A lot of people
I,
did. Yeah.
I saw him leave Durango and I checked in on him for the first time about 24 hours later. I didn't really watch the first day that much. And I saw where he was after 24 hours and thought, holy cow, he's either going to completely shatter this record or he's going to fizzle out in a couple of days. And then about, I think it was day 3 or 4, he started to slow down pretty dramatically. And
Yeah.
I was really nervous, and I knew kind of what he was going through, and I knew that he would have to pull back a little bit, and I'm so glad he recovered. But it was kind of an anxious thing to watch a spot tracker go across the map, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it was not fun to have the crew come back looking stressed and haggard and
Oh yeah.
saying that they had waited at this interception point based, and we had our logistics guy was so spot on. He was just incredibly detail oriented, and his predictions were so close every time. And then when Jeff started to struggle a lot towards the end, and the predictions were wildly off, and it was so hard knowing when they come back and they'd be like, hey, he didn't look so good, or yeah, he was there hours after we thought he'd be. And I just, I can't talk to Jeff and I can't tell him you're doing a good job. I can't
Right.
hug him. Well, like he likes to hug anyway, but
Yeah.
I can't. um yeah, it was really I feel stupid saying it was hard because I mostly just sat in the truck and ate snacks for
Sure.
9 days, but yeah, it was challenging.
It is. And I don't know, having been on both sides where I've had outside contact with people when I'm trying to do something really hard and when I haven't had that. And I don't know which is better, to be honest with you, as an adventurer, at least. I know which is better for the people back home,
Yeah.
um, until something bad happens. And then, I did this trip across Alaska, and we were trying to cross the Brooks Range without resupply of 600 miles. And we chose not to have any contact with the outside world, and we would
Wow.
blog. But the way we would do it is I would call one of my staff on a sat phone and
Hmm.
leave a voicemail message and dictate the blog on the voicemail message, and then he would type it in and upload it to our blog.
Oh,
So this was a long time ago. This was 2006. So
yeah.
we didn't have the technology that we have today to manage things. And then 10 days in, well, 5 days in, I fell and broke my ankle. And so I had to walk another 5 days. And so
Oh my
seeing the outside world watch this unfold over the next 5 days, especially Stephanie back home, was a
God.
little bit traumatic. And so by the time I returned on a bush plane back to Kotzebue, then the floodgates kind of opened. But it was definitely this really difficult tension to deal with, both on my end because I wanted outside contact at that point, and on
Hmm.
Stephanie's end because she wanted to know that I was okay. And it was a difficult thing to deal with.
Yeah, that reminds me of his last night when it was the only time that we didn't know if the record was in jeopardy pretty much on this last night.
Hmm.
And the crew had gone out for one of their final interception points, and they thought he'd hit it about 11 p.m. And so I had gone to the end because they said, okay, he'll probably be in around 9 a.m. we predict in the
Right.
morning if he's here at 11. And so I was sitting there and I was waiting for them. And I knew at that point, the crew would typically get their shot of him. And then it would be about 90 minutes later, they'd show up to where I was. And so I'm sitting in the parking lot in this stupid little rental car on the Denver side and waiting to hear from them. Hey, we got it. We're heading out. And then it's 12:30 and then it's 1 a.m. And then it's 2 and there's nothing from the crew. And I keep refreshing the spot tracker on Jeff's and he's not moving. And so, I'm sure that these things, this horrible pit in your stomach, like what is wrong? What's happening? It
Right.
was not following any normal pattern that we'd had over the past 9 days. And so finally at 5 in the morning, I got this text from Dylan and it said, we think something's wrong with Jeff. He has moved 22 miles in 13 hours.
Mhm.
And it was just the worst thing I could have possibly seen. And so yeah, they stayed up all night at this one spot waiting for him and he never showed up. And he was having a really bad time. And then of course Dylan said, like, at this point the record's in jeopardy. And at that point I didn't care. I was just like,
Right.
what's wrong with him? Go find him, go get him.
Yeah.
Like, you're so close, you're like within a couple miles, go get him. But they couldn't because that's not part of what this
Right.
is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you're in the Brooks Range, you want to talk to people. Jeff's really struggling, I want to talk to him. And I guess there's a lot to be said for doing it completely without contact and unsupported, but also at what point is it just too much?
Right. So what was going on with him during that time?
His body was just completely falling apart.
Yeah.
And couple of our guys were ultra runners, and they said, they're like, what's happening? They were kind of explaining to me what was happening to Jeff's body at that point. And they're like, essentially, like, his body's eating itself, um and there's only so much you can do. And he had no food left. And which I found out later, he had done the last 18 hours without any food. And so, yeah, his knees were locking up. He could go a half mile, then he had to lie down. And so it was really just kind of what we thought was happening, was that his body was just completely breaking down and he could not keep going. And I thought, what's going to happen to him if he doesn't get this record that he's based so much off of? And I mean, there's all these complicated things that go into that. But once we realized he was moving, the crew caught him at, like, I think, like, maybe 5:30 in the morning, 6 in the morning. And then they came to meet me at the trailhead, and it was a mess. It was awful. Good for Jeff. I'm very proud of him, but it's
Yeah.
crazy to watch something like that happen to someone that you love.
Yeah, I don't think, on the flip side, that as the adventurers, we appreciate what you all go through either. There's a lot of psychology that goes into dealing with your significant other trying to do something that has so much uncertainty, and it can be
Really?
that traumatic.
Oh, well, after this is over, can you send me some of that info? I'm actually really curious, because it was so much more intense than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure. Stephanie and I have talked about it a lot. I can certainly send you some stuff. So
Yeah.
what point did you realize that he was going to pull this off?
Oh my God, Ryan, like 2 hours before he did.
Right.
So it went from being 100% certain that he's going to blow this out of the water, he's going to break 9 days, to, like, okay, he's still doing well, to, okay, he's not doing well at all, to, okay, he's within 15 miles, unless he just collapses right now, he's going to do it. And then we also knew from our guys in the crew who have done the Colorado Trail, they're like, okay, Maggie, calm down. It's all downhill from here. It's blazing hot. He doesn't have very good water. He has no food, but at this point, it's all downhill. Like, he's just has to, like, roll himself to the finish, and he's going to do it. So he got it with, like, I don't remember, like, what, like 9 hours?
Yeah, something
9
like
hours?
that.
Yeah. So at that point, it was just a relief. And I was bouncing around the finish line in my normal pit of anxiety, just waiting to see that tiger shirt and one very smelly man just come staggering through the canyon. So
yeah, it was
did
an
it.
incredible effort. He did it. I'm really glad that you supported him on it, and we'll be excited to see what's next. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
You're welcome. Thanks for chatting.
You bet.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Backpacking Light podcast. The Backpacking Light podcast is advertising free thanks to membership fees paid for by Backpacking Light members. Backpacking Light members, thank you for keeping us from subjecting listeners to advertisements for coffee replacements, foam mattresses, and work share spaces. A BackpackingLight.com membership gives you access to 20 years of archives, forums, and online courses. So please consider supporting this podcast and become a member right now at backpackinglight.com/subscribe. You can download the show notes for this episode at backpackinglight.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review. It really does help other people find the show. Thanks for listening to the Backpacking Light podcast. I'm Andrew Marshall. And if we can leave you with one parting message, it's this: pack less, be more, because lighter is better. Happy trails, everybody.
So I shoulder my backpack, walk away from the